I believe in God, and I believe in other people like the way you want to be treated.
And finally I stopped singing because I thought it really wasn't fair to charge people money to see me bark.
Neon still bleeds across Lower Broadway, but inside the silent Grand Ole Opry House, another kind of light is fading. Out in the seats, you can almost hear old ticket stubs rustle, as though restless fans had returned just to ask where their heroes went. 20 voices once filled these rafters every Friday night, yet each was driven off stage by an invisible enemy, memory thieves, crippling tremors, broken hearts, and storms brewing inside the mind. Today, their stories come together like a backstage confessional no publicist could sanitize. We are not here for glossy career highlights or safe museum plaques. We are here for the last grim tour no one advertised, the one where brave performers raised microphones one final time knowing the spotlights were brighter than their futures. Pay attention, because technology may resurrect some of them in glowing holograms, but the real flesh and blood sagas behind those digital ghosts are far more gripping. Lean in and listen before the ushers flick the main lights back on, because once this curtain drops, the echoes will be all that remains, and you might never walk these wooden aisles the same way again. One wrong chord and legends start coughing in darkness. Glenn Campbell was the first to admit he feared nothing except forgetting why the crowd was cheering. In 2011, he stepped up to a podium, smiled that Arkansas grin, and told the world he had Alzheimer's. Reporters gasped. Campbell just winked and announced a farewell tour titled "I'm Not Gonna Miss You," a joke cruel in its honesty. Night after night, he shredded solos that seemed to outrun the plaques building in his brain. Backstage, lyric teleprompters crept higher, chord charts grew larger, and his wife taped the set list to every amplifier. When the notes finally slipped through his fingers, he waved like a rancher closing the gate for good and disappeared into care facilities no camera could enter. Rumor claims a startup now trains an AI model on his isolated guitar stems, promising a brand new Campbell album by Christmas. Maybe algorithms can fake his chicken pickin' runs, but they will never mirror that half-panicked, half-ecstatic grin he flashed whenever memory returned in time for the chorus. The rhinestone cowboy rode into the fog on his own horse, leaving us blinking in the arena lights he no longer recognized. Family photos taped to his Telecaster offered breadcrumbs he stubbornly followed. Roy Acuff, crowned the king of country music, made the Opry stage his living room for over half a century, yet by the early 90s even kings grow tired. Heart failure stalked him like a persistent heckler, turning every curtain call into a wager against collapse. Acuff refused oxygen tanks and wheelchairs in public. Instead, he leaned on his fiddle as though the maple wood were a cedar cane blessed by the Smoky Mountains. Fans swear they saw him whisper to the instrument, asking it to hold him upright one more verse. His final appearance came at 89, a brisk wave during which his once thunderous voice shrank to a reed-thin rasp. But the crowd erupted anyway, honoring a man who had shown up even when his pulse stuttered like a broken metronome. Backstage, he confessed to friends that the real pain was not leaving the spotlight, but leaving the fiddle silent in its case. When he died months later, technicians found rosin dust on the stage boards, as if his bow had continued ghost-stroking a coda only angels could hear. Medical charts warned of imminent collapse, yet his trademark grin never surrendered an inch of authority to the crowd. Linda Ronstadt once belted high-altitude notes so pure they could peel chrome off a tour bus. When Parkinsonian tremors ambushed her vocal cords, she faced the unthinkable, singing without a voice. Record executives offered sympathy statements. Linda countered with a memoir titled Simple Dreams, revealing she now communicated through story rather than song. Then 2023 arrived, and HBO's post-apocalyptic drama threaded her melancholy ballad Long, Long Time through a heartbreaking scene, catapulting the 1970 recording back onto global charts. Younger listeners assumed she was still touring. In truth, she was practicing handwriting exercises to steady wobbling muscles. Startups chased the viral wave, training synthetic voices to finish the melody lines her throat could no longer lift. Ronstadt gave cautious blessing, quipping that machinery might sing on key but would never sweat under desert stage lights. Her real triumph became quieter, mentoring young Chicana singers, teaching them phrasing tricks between tremor-free windows and laughing whenever they teased her about digital immortality. She lost a battle for decibels but won a war for legacy, proving a silenced microphone can still headline a revolution. Each lesson ended with her palm pressed to their diaphragm, feeling courage bloom like secret percussion in young throats. John Hartford danced clogged rhythms while sawing a fiddle, piloting riverboats by day and mandolin licks by night, until non-Hodgkin's lymphoma began shutting off his limbs like dimmer switches. Doctors told him to conserve energy, so he rolled a rocking chair onto the Opry stage and let the chair keep time. Audience members leaned forward, unsure whether to clap or cry when his voice cracked into a whispery falsetto that somehow felt more intimate than his youthful roar. He joked that he was saving gas, not dying. In private, he sketched river maps, planning one last imaginary voyage where current carried him without needing arms. Chemotherapy thinned his hair, but not his mischief. He hid a kazoo in his breast pocket and wheezed it during hospital rounds, turning sterile corridors into makeshift hoedowns. When the end arrived, nurses claimed they heard faint paddle wheel sounds as his monitors flatlined, a final prank from the steamboat philosopher. Hartford's departure proved that even a body sinking into itself can still cause ripples powerful enough to rock an entire genre. His wind-tossed hat now sits in the country hall lobby, brim scarred by sweat, daring passers-by to finish the unfinished jig he once started. Randy Travis built his legend on volcanic baritone dips that could rattle shot glasses off saloon tables, so the 2013 stroke that hijacked his speech felt like watching a cathedral collapse in slow motion. Viral cardiomyopathy had weakened his heart first, then a clot blitzed his brain, leaving him trapped behind a smile that understood every joke but could answer none. For years, he communicated only through thumb-ups and tearful eye glints. Then engineers unveiled an AI voice clone stitched together from decades of studio takes. They fed it a brand new ballad, and the result sounded heartbreakingly familiar, like younger Randy had returned from a time capsule. Critics debated ethics, but fans simply wept. Travis attends showcases in silence, squeezing his wife's hand whenever the phantom voice nails a tricky dip. No one knows whether the technology comforts or torments him, yet his presence transforms each playback into sacred ritual. The man who once warned hearts to buckle up now listens to his own digital double steering the chorus home on his behalf. Producers swear they saw moisture shimmer in his eyes, a quiet blessing that every Rust Belt radio DJ instantly understood as permission to spin it wild all night. Country music's open road never asked for medical clearances, and Marty Robbins paid the toll. Multiple heart attacks punched holes through his chest like stray bullets, yet he kept racing stock cars between Opry bookings, claiming speed soothed the ticking bomb inside him. After surgery number 3, nurses caught him humming pit row engine noises through an oxygen mask. He died days after finishing overdubs on a cowboy epic, leaving producers arguing which take felt final enough. Doug Somm followed a similar highway, a psychedelic Tex-Mex wizard whose heart also ran out of highway in a lonely motel room. He'd spent the previous evening raving about a record that would unite conjunto accordion with Austin funk, then collapsed while scribbling chord shapes onto hotel stationery. No paparazzi captured his last breath. Only a maid discovered him at checkout, guitar still warm beside tangled bedsheets. 2 separate ticker failures, 1 shared lesson. The music industry issues platinum plaques but rarely prescribes rest. Both men treated chest pain like encore applause until silence delivered its brutal standing ovation. Paramedics later remarked that his fingertips were stained with fresh string rust, proof he strummed mid-sentence, rather than admit the night was over for him. Naomi Jud's harmonies with daughter Winona once sounded like sunrise filtered through stained glass, yet behind the glow she was wrestling monsters the public couldn't hear. Treatment-resistant depression crept into her dressing rooms, coating mirrors with foggy self-doubt no makeup artist could wipe away. She announced retirement in the 90s, citing hepatitis C, but insiders whispered about darker storms. Doctors tweaked medications, tabloids twisted symptoms into clickbait. Naomi fought back with advocacy, touring psychiatric wards and urging patients to speak louder than their demons. Still, some days, even applause felt like static. In 2022, on the eve of a Hall of Fame induction, the disease finally cornered her. The family guarded details, calling it a private tragedy. Fans lit vigils from Appalachia to Austin. Her legacy now lives in the tremor of Wynana's solo encores, every shaky breath an act of defiance against the silence that swallowed her mother. Depression may own the final period, but it never erased the passionate italics Naomi etched across an entire generation of country lyrics. At candlelight gatherings, strangers traded stories of how her song stopped them from jumping midnight fences, a reminder that broken healers still stitch others, even while bleeding themselves dry. Tom T. Hall wrote slice-of-life ballads so vivid you could smell the fried bologna, yet his own life ended in murkier detail. With age came chronic pain and creeping isolation on his Tennessee farm. Friends noticed the storyteller who once greeted everyone with a sly grin began skipping industry dinners and letting guitar strings corrode. He told one caller he was tired of chasing a muse that now spoke in riddles. In 2021, he was found lifeless, authorities hinting at self-inflicted means, though official statements stayed decorous. Radio stations spun "That's How I Got to Memphis" on loop, and suddenly the lyrics sounded like a confession nobody decoded in time. Nashville debated whether to air the speculation, worried imitation might follow exposure. Meanwhile, younger songwriters dissected Hall's catalog, realizing his happiest hooks often carried razor-thin undercurrents. The tragedy reframed his artistry, turning every clever turn of phrase into foreshadowing. His farmhouse porch remains intact, rocking chair frozen mid-swing, daring passersby to answer the questions his last line left unasked. Mental health hotlines reported a spike in calls that week, proof that even posthumous honesty can jolt strangers awake and steer them toward daylight instead of the lure of permanent quiet. Kenny Rogers built an empire on gravel velvet wisdom, preaching gambler lore while stacking crossover Grammys. In 2017, he announced he was folding the touring table for good, citing a mishmash of ailments that later crystallized into bladder cancer. True to gambler mythos, he controlled the narrative, scheduling a grand farewell concert packed with duet partners who owed him radio immortality. Backstage, a discreet nurse adjusted catheters between photo ops, and Rogers joked about betting against the odds one last time. He passed in 2020, yet rumors surfaced 5 years later when Dolly Parton hinted in an interview that he had shielded fans from even harsher diagnoses. The clip went viral, sparking heated debates about celebrity transparency versus sacred privacy. What remains certain is that Rogers curated his exit like a perfect bridge in The Gambler, teaching listeners to walk away before life counts your chips for you. His beard may have gone silver, but his timing stayed gold until the final fade-out. Streaming data shows the song's nightly spins triple at Las Vegas poker hours, suggesting insomniac card dealers still lean on his gravelly counsel whenever fluorescent lights bleach the table edges into jittery mirages of looming debt and regret. Songwriter Hank Cochran felt pancreatic fire long before doctors named it, yet he kept penning classics from a hospice recliner, his morphine pump clicking like a metronome. Charlie Louvain battled the same ruthless tumor, recording a grimly triumphant final album between chemo sessions. Fans later swore they could hear IV drips hidden beneath his harmony. Earl Scruggs, Banjo Revolutionary, faced age-dragged heart woes that slowed his legendary three-finger roll to a deliberate, almost meditative pulse. Still, every slowed note cut like a chisel, carving silence into sculpture. Mel Tillis wrestled intestinal blockages and post-surgery complications, his famous stutter flaring under pain, yet he transformed each hesitation into comic timing that disarmed worry. Together, these four men formed a shadow quartet, each solo a lesson in persevering through cellular mutiny. Industry insiders recall elevator rides where oxygen tanks, pill organizers, and half-finished lyrics shared cramped corners. None asked for pity. Each only feared the day inspiration would stall before his heartbeat. Their exits remind us that genius often thrives between hospital beeps, and that the quiet click of a nurse's pen can sometimes mark the downbeat of a masterpiece. Even painkillers could not mute the stubborn metronome of their creative pulse. Johnny Paycheck spent final tours hiding an emphysema oxygen line behind Black Marshall cabinets, pausing between songs to drag an inhale that rattled like loose cymbals. Critics accused him of nostalgia exploitation. Paycheck just grinned and called the tube his backup singer. By the end, hotel staff wheeled him to gigs where he sang seated, cowboy hat tilted low to mask ash-gray lips. Freddie Fender endured lung cancer alongside spiraling kidney failure, surviving transplants that bought studio time but stole stage stamina. He joked the new organs played different keys, forcing him to relearn old hits at half-tempo. Gospel legend Glenn Payne, fighting liver cancer, climbed bus steps with dignified slowness, insisting the cathedrals perform until audiences learned every word by heart so he could eventually mouth them unheard. Each man rationed breath like gold dust, refusing to squander a syllable. Fans responded with softer applause, aware the smallest cheer could topple dwindling lungs. When the inevitable arrived, their instruments stayed tuned, waiting for owners who would never reclaim them. The silence afterward felt paradoxically full, swelling with all the notes they had forced out when breathing itself felt like swallowing gravel. Yet grace hovered above every labored phrase. Keith Whitley's velvet drawl disguised a relentless thirst. Liquor seeped into studio coffee mugs until his bloodstream hummed with dangerous proof. Friends staged interventions, but fame's after-parties offered endless refills. In 1989, after leaving a voicemail about grabbing breakfast, he slumped to the floor, bottle inches away, and the breakfast never happened. Dottie West's downfall began on a Nashville exit ramp where her speeding Chrysler spun into concrete, shattering ribs and finances. Surgeries piled up, bills mounted, and her once luminous stage presence dimmed into cautious steps. She retired quietly, curtain closing not with applause but with medical debt collectors. Farron Young, the outlaw charmer, faced severe depression compounded by declining sales. He sold his publishing rights for quick cash, then spiraled into deeper shadows. When he ended his life in 1996, reporters sanitized the narrative, yet colleagues remembered a man who gave hefty loans to rookies, even while contemplating his own exit. Addiction, accidents, and despair formed a barbaric trio, yet their music still runs wild at honky-tonks, where neon spurs kick dust off scratched vinyl, refusing to let their cautionary tales fade into hush. Every chorus now sounds like a haunted roadmap etched in spilt bourbon and asphalt. So here we stand among echoing pews of an empty Opry, aware that microphones remember everything, even when lungs, hearts, and minds betray their owners. Illness may have pushed these 20 legends off stage, but none left quietly, each carved confessionals into vinyl grooves that still spin under jittery jukebox lights. Technology ironed out scratches, cloned voices, and promised synthetic encores, yet the raw humanity hiding inside every flawed final take can never be remastered. If you feel a chill next time a classic drifts through a dive bar door, know it might be Campbell checking the key, Ronstadt silently conducting, or Travis gripping your wrist for balance. Their stories are cautionary, yes, but they are also blueprints. Play with urgency, love the crowd, accept the house lights when they dim. The neon outside is still bleeding into puddles, waiting for the next dreamer who believes talent outruns biology. Should that dreamer be you, carry a pocket recorder, hug your bandmates tighter, and memorize the emergency exits. Most important, when the final chorus arrives, pour every note into it as though memory, breath, and pulse depend on the sound, because one day they absolutely will. Let their ghosts guide your encore forward.